The gods before Yahweh is the traditional interpretation of the Holy Trinity incomplete. This video challenges established beliefs by exploring a Trinity that existed before Yahweh's creation, offering a radical reinterpretation of ancient religious concepts. Get ready to question everything you thought you knew about the divine. When most Christians think of God, they think of a single personal being who created everything. But was this always the case? And did this one God come from a group of gods that existed prior to his creation of the world? In today's video, we're going to take a deep dive into the Old Testament and uncover the evidence for a Trinity that existed before Yahweh's creation. To understand what we're talking about here, we need to first get a basic definition of what the Christian faith teaches about the Trinity. Very simply, it is the belief that there is one God who exists in three distinct persons: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Each person is fully God, yet there is only one God. So how does that work exactly? Well, if you ask most Christians, they will probably say that it is a mystery that we can't fully understand. However, I don't think that it has to be a mystery if we go back far enough. As we go back through church history, we find the early church fathers wrestling with the exact nature of the Trinity and trying to come up with a definition that made sense. Many of them landed on the analogy of a triangle, saying that just as a triangle is made up of three different angles, yet it is still one complete figure, so too is God, one being made up of three distinct persons. But what if I told you that this idea of a triune God actually goes back much further than even the early church? What if it was actually something that was already in existence long before the time of Jesus? In order to understand this, we need to take a look at the beginning of the Bible. Genesis chapter 1 tells the story of creation, and it tells us that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But what many people don't realize is that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was not the only God that the Israelites knew. He was actually just one in a pantheon of gods that were all part of the Canaanite religion. One of the most popular gods in this pantheon was El, who was considered to be the supreme God over all of the other gods. He was the creator of the universe, and he was also the father of many of the other gods, including Yahweh. Now, in the Old Testament, Yahweh is often referred to as the Son of God, and this is where things start to get interesting. If Yahweh was truly the Son of God, then this would mean that there was a God before Yahweh, a God who was his Father. However, when we read the creation account in Genesis, it says that God created the heavens and the earth. It doesn't say that he created them with someone else or that he had any helpers. So which is it? Did Yahweh create everything by himself? Or was he just one in a group of gods that were all part of the Canaanite religion? Well, the answer may surprise you. It turns out that the evidence actually points to a pre-existing Trinity. Let me explain. First, let's take a look at the name Yahweh. In Hebrew, the name Yahweh is made up of four letters: Yod, He, Wah, and He. When these letters are put together, they make the name Yahweh, but each letter also has a numerical value. When we add up the numerical values of each letter, we get the number 888. Now, I know that this may seem like a coincidence, but stay with me here. When we look at the name Jesus in Hebrew, we find that it adds up to the same exact value, 888. This is very significant because it shows that Yahweh and Jesus are connected in a special way. They both have the same name value, which could be interpreted as a type of pre-existing relationship between them, but there is even more evidence for a pre-existing Trinity. If we look at the book of Isaiah, chapter 45, verse 6, we read these words, "I am the Lord, and there is no other. I am He, and there is none like me." These words tell us two very important things. First, Yahweh is telling us that He is God, and that there are no other gods like Him. Second, He is also telling us that there are no other gods besides Him. This means that Yahweh is not the only God, because if He were, then He wouldn't be comparing Himself to other gods. So if there are other gods besides Yahweh, who are they? We can find the answer by taking a look at the pagan religions that were popular during the time of the Israelites. As I mentioned earlier, the Israelites were familiar with a pantheon of gods, and one of the most popular was the god El. El was considered to be the supreme god over all of the other gods, and he was also the father of many of them, including Yahweh. This means that Yahweh had a father, and that father was El. We can also see this in the Bible. In Deuteronomy chapter 30 to verse 8, we read these words, "When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when He separated mankind, He set up the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel." In this passage, the Israelites are being addressed as the children of God, and if they are the children of God, then Yahweh must be their father. And who was El, the head of the pantheon of gods that the Israelites knew? El was considered to be the supreme God, and he was also Yahweh. This means that Yahweh had a father, and that father was El. We can also see this in the Bible. In Deuteronomy chapter 30 to verse 8, we read these words, "When the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when He separated mankind, He set up the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of the children of Israel." In this passage, the Israelites are being addressed as the children of God, and if they are the children of God, then Yahweh must be their father. And who was El, the head of the pantheon of gods that the Israelites knew? El was considered to be the supreme God, and he was also Yahweh's father. So now we have established that there was at least one God before Yahweh, a God who was His father. But what about the Holy Spirit? Could there have been a pre-existing Trinity? The answer, my friends, lies in the Hebrew text. In the Old Testament, the Holy Spirit is often referred to as the Spirit of Yahweh or the Spirit of God. This tells us that the Holy Spirit was not separate from God, but was actually part of Him. So if the Holy Spirit was part of Yahweh, then this means that there was a pre-existing Trinity, a Trinity that existed before Yahweh created the world. Now, I know that this is a lot to take in, but stick with me here. There is one more piece of evidence that we need to look at. In the Old Testament, Yahweh is often depicted as having a council. This council is made up of other divine beings who advise Him and help Him to carry out His plans. In Isaiah chapter 6 verses 1 to 3, we read these words, "In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw also the Lord sitting on a high and lofty throne, and the train of His robe filled the temple. Above Him were seraphim, each with 6 wings. They covered their faces with their wings, and their feet also. they cried out to one another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. In this passage, Isaiah is describing a vision that he had of Yahweh sitting on a throne in the temple, and around him were other divine beings known as seraphim. Seraphim were the highest order of angels, and they were considered to be the closest to God. So what exactly were these seraphim doing around Yahweh? Were they just there to worship him, or were they also helping him to carry out his plans? Well, the answer is both. The seraphim were constantly praising and worshiping Yahweh, but they were also his counselors. They helped him to carry out his plans and execute his will. This is why Yahweh is often depicted as having a council, because these other divine beings, these seraphim, were his helpers. Now, I know that this may seem confusing, but let me break it down for you. Yahweh was the supreme God, but he had a council of other divine beings who helped him to carry out his plans. These beings were called seraphim, and they were the highest order of angels. Yahweh also had a father, and that father was El, who was the head of the pantheon of gods that the Israelites knew. And finally, the Holy Spirit was part of Yahweh, and the Holy Spirit was also part of this council. So what does all of this mean? Well, it means that there was a pre-existing Trinity, a Trinity that existed before Yahweh created the world. This Trinity was made up of Yahweh, his Father El, and the Holy Spirit, and this Trinity was responsible for creating everything. Now, I know that this is a lot to take in, but I hope that it has opened your mind to the possibility that there is more to the Trinity than what we're taught in church. I hope that you have seen that the Trinity actually goes back further than we think, and that there was a pre-existing Trinity that was responsible for creating the world. Now, before we dive in, I just want to mention that I'm going to be taking a break from my regular schedule next week, as I will be away visiting family. I'll be back the following week, though, so keep an eye out for new videos then. In the meantime, if you want to check out some of my previous videos, feel free to do so. Anyway, now that we've established that the idea of a triune God is not found in the Torah, it's time to explore another fascinating question. Did early Christians actually believe in a pre-Yahweh Trinity? The answer, as it often seems to be, is complicated and nuanced. There is no direct evidence that early Christians believed in a pre-Yahweh Trinity. However, scholars have identified certain elements in early Christian thought and practice that may suggest a belief in a pre-existing Trinitarian structure prior to Yahweh's revelation. Now this is speculation, but it's intriguing nonetheless. Early Christian writers like Justin Martyr and Irenaeus of Lyon asserted that Jesus had always existed alongside the Father, implying that timeless, eternal relationship between them. These ideas are reminiscent of the pagan concept of multiple deities coexisting in a hierarchical manner. For instance, the pre-Socratic philosopher Anaximander proposed a similar structure with the aperon, an undefined, boundless substance, giving rise to four elements, and an anthropomorphic God who emerged from the interaction of those elements. This triadic relationship between the infinite, the elements, and the God could be seen as a rudimentary form of a trinity, where the aperon represents a kind of transcendent source, from which the other to emerge and interact. In a similar vein, The Gnostics also held beliefs that resonate with the concept of a pre-existing Trinity. Gnosticism was a diverse collection of early Christian groups that emphasized personal revelation or gnosis as the path to salvation. They often conceived of a supreme, transcendent God who was unknowable and beyond human comprehension. This God was seen as the source of all creation, but not directly involved in the affairs of humanity. Instead, a lesser divine being known as the Demiurge was responsible for creating the material world and interacting with humans. This figure is sometimes portrayed as ignorant or even malevolent, which led some Gnostics to deny his divinity altogether, seeing him as a false god. In this Gnostic understanding, the Demiurge occupies a position analogous to Yahweh as the God of the Old Testament, while the supreme God remains transcendent and unknowable. And interestingly, some Gnostic texts refer to a Holy Spirit that proceeds from the unknown God, a concept that echoes the later Christian understanding of the Trinity. While it's impossible to say whether Gnosticism was a direct influence on the development of Trinitarian beliefs, the similarities between Gnostic thought and early Christian theology are striking and suggest a shared understanding of a transcendent God who reveals himself through various means. Another piece of evidence that has fueled speculation about a pre-Yahweh Trinity is the early Christian understanding of the Holy Spirit. In the Gospel of John, the Spirit is described as proceeding from the Father, a phrase that could be interpreted as indicating a pre-existing relationship between the two. Furthermore, the author of Hebrews refers to the spirit of prophecy, suggesting that prophetic ministry was understood as being empowered by the Spirit in a way that went beyond the ordinary experiences of believers. This idea of a special spirit connected to prophecy could be seen as a remnant of pre-Christian beliefs about ecstatic experience and otherworldly powers. Indeed, the broader context of first-century Judaism was filled with diverse religious and spiritual currents that may have contributed to early Christian conceptions of the Trinity. The Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, provide evidence of Jewish sectarianism that diverged from mainstream Pharisaic and Sadducee traditions. Some of these groups held unique beliefs and practices, such as the community at Qumran, which is believed to have produced the scrolls. While the exact nature of their beliefs is debated among scholars, some researchers have suggested that they may have held tritheistic beliefs based on interpretations of biblical texts, such as Isaiah 48:16, which speaks of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit together. Moreover, the Jewish mystical tradition known as Merkava mysticism, which centered around the contemplation of divine chariot imagery in the Hebrew Bible, may have also played a role in shaping early Christian ideas about the Trinity. Practitioners of Merkava mysticism sought to ascend to the heavenly realms and gain a vision of the divine chariot, or Merkava, which was believed to be a manifestation of God's presence. These mystical experiences often led to a deeper understanding of God's glory and a recognition of his transcendence. Some scholars have argued that elements of Merkava mysticism found their way into early Christian thought, contributing to the development of Trinitarian beliefs. It's important to note, however, that none of these examples provide conclusive evidence for a pre-Yahweh Trinity. The concept of a three-part Godhead is not explicitly stated in any pre-Christian text. Rather, these beliefs are inferred from various sources and are often subject to interpretation. Nevertheless, the similarities between early Christian theology and other religious traditions of the time are too great to be ignored. Some scholars have even suggested that early Christians may have used the term Trinity in a broader sense, encompassing not only the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but also other divine beings or powers such as angels or archangels. This view is supported by the fact that the term Trinity is not explicitly defined in the New Testament and was not widely used until the 4th century. During the early centuries of Christianity, Christians did not feel the need to define the relationship between the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, as they were fully confident that what was revealed by God was sufficient for salvation. It wasn't until later, when the Church began to encounter external challenges, such as the Arian controversy in the 4th century, that the need to articulate a precise definition of the Trinity became more pressing. To be fair, the idea of a pre-Yahweh Trinity is highly speculative and controversial. Most scholars agree that the doctrine of the Trinity, as it is understood today, developed gradually over several centuries. However, the exact nature and origins of this development are subjects of ongoing debate and research. Despite the lack of conclusive evidence for a pre-Yahweh Trinity, the possibility that early Christians held such beliefs serves as a reminder of the rich diversity of religious thought. In the ancient world, the early church was not simply a monolithic institution, but was composed of a variety of groups and individuals with different perspectives and experiences. Exploring the historical roots of Christian doctrine can help us appreciate the complexity and nuance of theological development and the various influences that have shaped our understanding of God. As we continue to study the origins of the Trinity, it's important to approach the topic with an open mind and a willingness to consider different perspectives. While we may never know for sure whether early Christians believed in a pre-Yahweh Trinity, the search for answers can lead us to a deeper appreciation for the history and development of Christian theology. The Yahweh Trinity has become a topic of debate, with many Christians accepting this doctrine and others rejecting it as unbiblical. However, some scholars suggest that the idea of a triune God is not unique to Christianity and can be found in ancient texts predating the emergence of Yahweh as a singular deity. This claim raises questions about the origins of the Trinity and its potential influence on early Christian thought. So what does the evidence actually say? In this episode, we'll explore the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity by analyzing various ancient texts and stories. We'll delve into myths and legends from different cultures, examining themes of creation, divine power, and the nature of reality. By doing so, we aim to shed light on the historical context surrounding the development of Trinitarian beliefs and gain a deeper understanding of the cultural influences that may have shaped early Christian theology. Join us on this journey as we uncover the fascinating narratives and insights that shed light on the evolution of religious ideas throughout history. But before we begin our discussion, please take the time to subscribe to my channel. Your support means a lot to me and helps me continue creating these videos. The question of whether a pre-Yahweh Trinity existed is a complex one that has been debated by scholars for centuries. Proponents of the idea argue that certain ancient texts and myths contain elements that parallel the Christian doctrine of the Trinity. They point to the similarities between the roles and attributes of the deities in these myths and those described in the Bible as evidence of a shared belief system or influence. For example, some scholars draw attention to the Babylonian creation myth known as the Enuma Elish. In this myth, the deities Marduk and Tiamat are said to have produced 11 offspring who were then scattered across the earth. One of these children was the goddess Narbu, who was associated with wisdom and writing. Proponents of the pre-Yahweh Trinity view Narbu as a possible counterpart to the Holy Spirit in the Christian Trinity, given her role as a bringer of divine knowledge and her association with the act of creation. Similarly, in the Egyptian mythology, the creation myth involves the interaction between three primary deities, Atum, Shu, and Tefnut. According to the myth, Atum emerged first as a self-created deity, and then produced Shu and Tefnut, representing air and moisture respectively. These three deities played significant roles in the subsequent creation of the world and the human race. Some scholars interpret this narrative as reflecting a Trinitarian structure that may have influenced early Christian beliefs. However, it's important to note that these parallels between ancient myths and the Christian doctrine of the Trinity are often debated and not universally accepted. Some scholars argue that any similarities are merely coincidental or that they can be explained by other factors, such as the influence of later Jewish and Christian texts on these myths. Additionally, the concept of the Trinity, as it is understood in Christianity, is distinct from these mythological accounts in several ways. One key difference lies in the nature of the deities involved. In ancient myths, the gods are often portrayed as having human-like qualities and engaging in interactions that reflect their own interests and perspectives. For example, in Greek mythology, the gods were known to have affairs, express personal preferences, and even compete against each other. In contrast, the Christian doctrine of the Trinity posits a single, all-knowing and perfect God who is separate from, and yet co-equal to his Son and the Holy Spirit. This distinction highlights the theological complexities and the need for careful analysis when exploring the topic of a pre-Yahweh Trinity. As we continue our investigation into the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity, it's essential to consider the broader historical and cultural context. The emergence of monotheism and the development of the doctrine of the Trinity were influenced by various factors, including philosophical ideas, theological debates, and the cultural norms of the time. For instance, the influence of Greek philosophy on early Christian thought is significant. Philosophers like Plato and his concept of the good, which represented a supreme and transcendent reality, may have provided a framework for understanding the relationship between the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit in the Trinity. Similarly, the Stoics' emphasis on the interconnectedness of all things and the Logos, or divine reason, may have contributed to the understanding of the Son as the embodiment of God's wisdom and his role in the creation and order of the universe. However, it's important to recognize that the reception of Greek ideas within Christianity was not without its challenges. Some Christian thinkers, particularly those within the church, express concerns about the potential conflict between paganism and the worship of the one true God. The early church fathers grappled with the issue of how to integrate classical learning into Christian theology without compromising the core tenets of their faith. Furthermore, the development of the doctrine of the Trinity was also shaped by ongoing theological debates within the Christian community, as Christians sought to define the nature of God and the relationship between His essence and His attributes. They engaged in extensive discussions and councils to formulate a coherent understanding. The Council of Nicaea in the year 325 AD is a pivotal moment in the history of the Trinity, as it led to the adoption of the Nicene Creed, which affirmed the divinity of Christ and His co-equality with the Father. Moreover, the cultural context of the time played a vital role in shaping perceptions of the Trinity. The Roman Empire, with its polytheistic roots and syncretic religious practices, provided a backdrop that both influenced and challenged early Christian thought. The hierarchical structure of Roman society and its veneration of certain individuals as divine or semi-divine may have contributed to the understanding of the Trinity as a hierarchical relationship among the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. However, the tension between paganism and emerging monotheism also led to persecution and martyrdom among early Christians, which in turn strengthened their resolve and commitment to their beliefs. In conclusion, the question of a pre-Yahweh Trinity is a subject of ongoing debate and scholarly inquiry. While some find evidence of Trinitarian ideas in ancient myths and literature, others argue against these parallels and highlight the distinct nature of the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, exploring the similarities and differences between ancient beliefs and early Christian thought reveals the complex historical and cultural factors that have shaped religious ideas over time. As we continue to investigate the origins and development of the Trinity, it's essential to approach the topic with intellectual humility, recognizing the limitations of our knowledge and the challenges of interpreting ancient texts and traditions. Engaging in respectful dialogue and considering diverse perspectives will foster a deeper understanding of this multifaceted subject and its significance within the broader context of religious history. The evidence regarding a pre-Yahweh Trinity is often interpreted differently depending on one's perspective and theological beliefs. Those who believe in the pre-existence of a Trinitarian concept argue that certain ancient texts and myths contain elements that parallel the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, suggesting a possible pre-Yahweh Trinitarian belief. On the other hand, those who reject the idea of a pre-Yahweh Trinity point out the significant differences between ancient myths and the Christian understanding of the Trinity, arguing against the notion of a shared Trinitarian origin. Ultimately, the question of whether a pre-Yahweh Trinity existed is a matter of faith and interpretation. Historical evidence can provide valuable insights into the development of religious ideas, but it cannot definitively prove or disprove the existence of a pre-Yahweh Trinity. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the evidence for a pre-Yahweh Trinity. We hope that this video has provided you with a deeper understanding of the topic and the various perspectives surrounding it. Please feel free to share your thoughts, insights, or questions in the comment section below. We value your engagement and would love to hear your perspectives. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the like button to stay updated with our latest episodes. Your support means a lot to us and helps us continue producing quality content on biblical topics. May the knowledge and wisdom shared in this video serve as a blessing to you. We want to thank you for your interest in this important topic. If you're interested in delving deeper into similar subjects, we encourage you to explore our other videos on the origins of biblical teachings. In our last episode, we discussed the pre-Yahweh Trinity or Trimorty, which was a common belief among the ancient Israelites during the period before the emergence of monotheism. We covered its origins, components, characteristics, and ultimately its decline after the establishment of Yahweh as the sole God of Israel. Now it's time for us to take a step back and look at this fascinating topic from a different angle. In today's episode, we'll be looking at some modern interpretations of the Trinity and discussing whether there could have been a pre-Yahweh Trinity that influenced the development of Abrahamic religions. So let's dive into the world of theology and philosophy and see what insights these ancient beliefs can offer us. One way to approach the subject of a pre-Yahweh Trinity is to examine the challenges and criticisms raised by modern scholars and thinkers. These can provide valuable insights into the potential difficulties and objections associated with accepting the Trinity as a foundational belief. By understanding these challenges, we can better evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of the argument for a pre-Yahweh Trinity and ultimately form our own opinions on the matter. For example, one prominent scholar has argued that the doctrine of the Trinity developed gradually over time through the work of early Christian theologians. According to this view, the idea of a triune God was not fully formed until several centuries after Jesus' death and resurrection. This challenges the notion of a pre-Yahweh Trinity because it suggests that the concept emerged within Christianity as a way to understand the nature of God rather than being a pre-existing belief that was later adopted by Jews and Christians. Another criticism of the pre-Yahweh Trinity is that it relies heavily on speculation and conjecture. Since there is no direct evidence of this belief system outside of a few biblical references and archaeological findings, much of the argument for its existence is based on interpreting ancient texts and artifacts in a particular way. This can be seen as problematic by those who require more concrete proof for such a significant claim. Furthermore, some scholars argue that the evidence for a pre-Yahweh Trinity is inconclusive at best, and that other possible explanations should be considered. For instance, the worship of multiple gods by ancient Israelites could have been a common practice in the ancient Near East that doesn't necessarily point to a belief in a Trinity. Additionally, the concept of Shem Hamfrush, which refers to the name of God that consists of 4 letters, could be interpreted in various ways without necessarily implying a triune deity. However, despite these challenges and criticisms, the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity continues to hold a certain appeal for many people. The idea that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was originally part of a greater pantheon of deities offers an intriguing explanation for the similarities between various ancient religions, and the development of monotheism. It also raises fascinating questions about the nature of God and the relationship between the Old and New Testament. Furthermore, exploring the Trinity provides an opportunity to delve into the rich tapestry of ancient Israelite culture and beliefs, shedding light on a period of history that is often shrouded in mystery and debate. By studying this topic, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexity and evolution of religious thought throughout history. It is important to note that the decision to accept or reject the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity ultimately comes down to personal belief and interpretation. There is no definitive proof of such a belief system, and much of the evidence is open to interpretation and debate. However, by engaging with the arguments and evidence presented by both sides, we can develop a deeper understanding of the historical context of the Abrahamic religions and the evolution of theological ideas. Ultimately, the question of whether or not there was a pre-Yahweh Trinity is a complex one that requires careful consideration of various historical, theological, and philosophical perspectives. While there are valid criticisms and challenges to this concept, it nevertheless offers an intriguing lens through which to view the development of ancient Israelite beliefs and the broader context of the Abrahamic religions. By engaging with this topic, we can expand our understanding of the rich tapestry of human history and the enduring impact of ancient beliefs on our world today. Whether or not we ultimately accept the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity, the journey of exploration and discovery is an enriching experience that can deepen our appreciation for the complexities of human faith and the search for meaning in our existence. There are potential benefits to be gained from exploring the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity. First, it can provide a deeper understanding of the development of Abrahamic religions. By examining the potential influence of ancient polytheistic beliefs on the emergence of monotheism, we can gain insight into the historical context in which Judaism, Christianity, and Islam arose. This can help us appreciate the gradual process through which these religions evolved and the various cultural influences that shaped their development. Moreover, exploring the Trinity can shed light on the nature of ancient Israelite culture and society. By investigating the beliefs and practices associated with the worship of multiple gods, we can learn more about the religious landscape of the ancient Near East and the ways in which ancient Israelites understood the divine. This can provide a richer, more nuanced understanding of the historical setting of the Old Testament and the cultural norms of the time. Furthermore, the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity raises fascinating questions about the nature of God and the relationship between the Old and New Testament. By considering the possibility that Yahweh was originally part of a polytheistic pantheon, we can gain new perspectives on the theological themes explored in both testaments. This can lead to a deeper appreciation for the complexities of divine revelation and the evolving understanding of God throughout religious history. Moreover, engaging with the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity can foster critical thinking and open-minded reflection on religious beliefs and the nature of existence. By exploring different interpretations and challenging conventional views, we can sharpen our analytical skills and cultivate a more nuanced understanding of theological concepts. This can lead to greater intellectual and spiritual growth, as well as a deeper appreciation for the diversity of human thought and experience. Finally, the exploration of the Trinity can serve as a reminder of the interconnectedness of human history and the universality of religious experience. By recognizing the shared beliefs and practices across different cultures and time periods, we can foster a sense of global citizenship and appreciate the common threads that unite us. Despite our differences, this can promote greater understanding, empathy, and cooperation among people of different faiths and belief systems, leading to a more tolerant and compassionate world. The concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity offers a fascinating lens through which to view the development of ancient Israelite beliefs and the broader context of the Abrahamic religions. By embracing the process of exploration and discovery, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the rich tapestry of human history and the enduring impact of ancient beliefs on our world today. Whether or not we ultimately accept the concept of a pre-Yahweh Trinity, the journey of learning and reflection can enrich our understanding of ourselves, our place in the universe, and the profound questions that have guided humanity throughout time. We hope you enjoyed this exploration of the pre-Yahweh Trinity and the challenges and benefits associated with this fascinating topic. Remember to engage in respectful dialogue, embrace diverse perspectives, and continue your journey of discovery beyond this episode. Thank you for joining us on this thought-provoking journey, and we look forward to sharing more captivating stories and insights in future episodes.